Welcome to Blaise the Trail podcast, bringing you authentic and vulnerable stories that will inspire you to breathe fire on this world and become your own hero. Here's your host, Blaise Hunter.
Hello, welcome to Blaise the Trail podcast. I'm Blaise Hunter, and I am a fertility expert. No, I don't help people get pregnant. This is a different type of expertise. I actually inspire women to birth confidence, to birth their books, business ideas, dreams, passions, and goals, as well as help them discover peace amongst infertility. After going through my own sets of traumas and tragedies, dealing with a rare disease, and experiencing 3 miscarriages, I decided to take charge of my life and not let life happen to me, but rather become the hero of my own life. I am not barren. I continually birth my purpose every day. So that's why I created this show, to demonstrate how even though we all experience setbacks and disappointments, we still have a destiny to birth. We just need to blaze the trail and be expecting. This podcast will inspire you to lean into your hardships and allow them to be the vehicle that transports you into becoming the hero of your life so you can breathe fire on this world. This week's episode is called The Disruptor, and some points we'll cover are discussing how we can disrupt the status quo to create big impact, what sorts of changes need to be made in the education system on various levels, and how being an agitator goes with creating change. And I have my friend here, Nikki Eberhardt, to discuss this topic. Nikki Eberhardt is Assistant Professor of Business at Minerva. She is on Delta Airlines' global talent team to craft leadership development and mentor culture strategies. Nikki holds executive positions with socially driven startups and does pro bono work with Global Citizen, a movement harnessing voices of influencers, world leaders, and corporates with global citizens to end poverty. She was MC moderator for Cross Industry Innovation Conference at NASA Space Center and speaker at other events, including TEDx Oxford. Nikki has a PhD Global Sociology, MA International Development, and an Oxford MBA. Welcome, Nikki, to the show.
Thanks, Blaise. Nice to be with you today.
I appreciate it so much coming in. I've, looked over your information, your bio, all what you're about, and wow, it's just incredible. And this is a great platform to have you on and discuss different things about disrupting the system. So this is a great podcast episode. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Excited to be here. It's interesting, given our current circumstances in a COVID era. It's all about disruption, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that it's created a little bit of a shaken up to the core because a lot of times humans, we don't like change. And so here we are faced with it, and we're going to have to understand this is the new normal. Disruption is normal, and it's okay.
Absolutely. It's okay. And there are embedded opportunities in disrupting the status quo as well.
For sure. This is going to be such an interesting topic. But before we dive deeper into that, I'd just like to know a little bit more of your backstory and how you ended up where you are today as the disruptor.
Well, thank you so much for asking that. I started in a very sort of normal, apparently normal neighborhood with a very sort of provincial approach to life. But I had a father who had suffered from some really difficult struggles as a young boy. He was in a very underprivileged neighborhood, and my grandfather was a functioning alcoholic, and they had very few material means. And so from a very young age, my dad learned to really try to give voice for those who were underrepresented and really seek out the one in ways that were meaningful. And so as I grew up in this sort of sheltered circumstance myself, I was always reminded by him that there were those who were underprivileged that needed voice, that deserved to have voice, and should have as much access to the resources I enjoyed as I did. And so we spent time working with veteran populations, refugee populations, homeless populations, And I realized that I was sort of juxtaposed between a lot of I could use that and leverage that in a way to help humankind. And so as I grew into adulthood, it became a magnet for me to really focus on what I could do to give voice and help enable folks to lift themselves out of difficult circumstances. And ultimately, I found tackling extreme poverty as one of my main focuses. And so as I did that, it became something that was so satisfying to me and rewarding to really interface with very diverse people from very different backgrounds than mine. And it became my fuel. I became so excited to be a part of global movements of like-minded people who were really focused on tackling the world's biggest challenges. And so that's where I sit today. And I've tried to develop toolkits that enable me to be the most effective at tackling that. And now in my old age, I'm really hyper-focused on helping to train the next cadre of global leaders so that they can, in turn, be the change, as Gandhi said, that we wish to see in the world.
Oh, that's so amazing. And, that speaks volumes to help people find where their giftings are, their passions are, and their purpose, is that you had a link with that, with your family line, and you turned it into being the change, like you said. And that really helps people, is identifying what is your pain in your life, what is the problem you've identified, what irritates you or gets you fueled up and fired up, because that usually is the signal of where your purpose lies, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it really is. It's that inner place, it's that inner drive that we have. It's what resonates with us about, tackling what aspect of all of those global issues that lay before us. That, as I say to my students, keep us up at night and get us out of bed in the morning. So I'd like to share a message that was relayed to me by the former head of entrepreneur development at Google. I met him at Oxford. We had quite an interesting discussion, and he said, next time you're at headquarters, let's connect. And so I did when I was in California. And he had been hired as the head of entrepreneur development, which was to essentially coach the C-suite executives and the founders of Google in their own entrepreneurial journeys. He had had the opportunity throughout the duration of his career, even prior to that appointment, working with over 10,000 leaders. His name is Puneet Agarwal. And he said to me, Nikki, I've worked with over 10,000 leaders, and of those, how many of them do you suppose are true leaders? And I said, I'm so curious. I don't know, 20%. He said, no, 0.1%. I said, well, how do you define a true leader? He said, to me, a true leader is someone who is true to his or her life purpose. And that has always stayed with me. We have some very charismatic leaders around us, some high-functioning leaders around us, but to me, the most important leaders, to echo Puneet, are those who are driven by purpose. And so in my life and in the lives of other admirable leaders around me, I'm always trying to help myself and help others really get clear on what our life purpose is. And then every sort of professional and personal decision we make can be informed by what that purpose is.
Oh, that's so amazing. That's a great way to explain it, and totally agree. that, not all leaders are actually leading, right? And that we have to work towards that. And I really have a mission on my own of taking myself to task to not just be a good talker about it and say all the right things and then say, oh, yes, I want my daughter to be an earth shaker and a world changer, but mama's just sitting here status quo and not living to my purpose and potential. So if I want to inspire the next generation to be a world leader, then I have to be that leader to model that for them. And so I hold the line on that. I really get myself in check. Like, am I actually walking the walk or am I just talking? And I want to make sure those two are aligned. And that's what I inspire others to, because, it's easy to chatter and it's easy to know all the right things to say and right principles and right morals and values. But then are we really living it day by day, right? Like, are we really holding the line on that? And that's something we all can challenge ourselves with, hey?
Absolutely. And it really is sort of a daily exercise, isn't it? Keeping ourselves honest and really trying to sort of recalibrate around whether I'm actually fulfilling that life purpose and living up to sort of what's expected of me. Yeah, I mean, there are many days that I felt I just give myself a free pass, essentially, for whatever reason. But I think it's just as important to be kind to ourselves and realize that we're not always going to be able to do this. It becomes much easier to make those day-to-day decisions in terms of how we spend our time, what organizations we choose to get behind, and who we partner with. So it's a fun daily exercise to engage in, and like we were chatting about, it's taking constant recalibration, and that's a good thing. It's the process that matters.
Wonderful. So you say you seek to disrupt at the intersection of tech and scalable social ecological impact. Can you explain what that means?
A lot of crazy words. Yeah. So I spent quite a few years really focusing on international development and really trying to empower local leaders so they could lead out on initiatives that mattered to them to build their communities. It's completely rewarding work, amazing to interface with so many stellar individuals all over the world. At some point, I realized we've developed some really incredible solutions, more like they've developed some incredible solutions. But what do we do to scale this in order to tackle these challenges around the world? And so I looked to some business solutions, and I also looked to technology, specifically exponential technologies like artificial intelligence, among others, to see how we can leverage technology in really meaningful ways in order to power communities so that they can continue to develop themselves. And so what do I mean by the intersection of tech and scalable socially ecological impact? It's exactly that. It's the traditional, here we are, we're a nonprofit organization tackling global issues, to we're a nonprofit teaming up with other types of partners, government partners, let's say business partners, among others, community leaders, civil leaders, and we're leveraging technology to really drive these initiatives to the next level.
Wow. Yes. I totally agree. Like, that's amazing and a good explanation of it. And it sounds like when we talk about disrupt, it's really, peeling back foggy layers and lenses and really getting to honing in to the core of something and harnessing that to have the best impact, don't you think?
Absolutely. Let me give you an illustration of what I mean. I met a young man, he's in his 20s, and he really wanted to make a difference in the world. And he knew that life-saving drugs needed to be delivered to communities throughout sub-Saharan Africa. But there is a dearth, a lack of infrastructure throughout. And so he developed a drone and built a business around a drone company to deliver those life-saving drugs to rural farmer populations throughout sub-Saharan Africa. And so he really wanted to make that impact. He knew it was scalable. The technology enabled it to be scalable, and also to sort of bypass the lack of infrastructure and utilize the most sort of cutting-edge technologies to really solve a problem. And so he's done that. And there are numerous examples of other people and organizations that are currently doing cutting-edge work by leveraging that technology in order to tackle the issues.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Yeah, such amazing things that you're doing and what you stand for, and this is so exciting. And one of the things you also mentioned is that you are working to reinvent the university experience. Let's dive in deeper with that topic. I know we're going to have a lot of things to say. How are you doing this, and what have you identified as flaws in the current system?
Fantastic set of questions. Number one, flaws in the current system. There was a New York Times article published just within the last couple of days that highlighted the work that we're doing at Minerva and other institutions. And an associate professor of education at Stanford named Mitchell Stevens, he reported that even before the pandemic, higher education was, quote, in many ways being held together by prayers, Band-Aids, international students, and a lot of debt. Mm-hmm. And what the pandemic creates, he continues, is a kind of existential challenge to so many colleges and universities and business model presumptions. And so what he's essentially arguing is that this enables disruption because the higher education model is in trouble. Massive amounts of student debt. We've had an exponential growth in terms of competent students who could be learning at some of the best institutions of higher education, but many of those institutions have not increased their enrollment for over 30 years. And so we have this huge market opportunity to really provide a better kind of education, so in how education is delivered, but also to whom and for whom the education can be available to. And so I'm thinking of incredible students from around the world who historically, due to whatever reasons, visa restrictions or currency exchange problems, could simply not study at some of the better institutions in the United States. And so my university, Minerva, has created a really innovative model that's trying to disrupt higher education.
I love that because, I think we're going to dive in more on this. I have some insights as well because it seems like in every area, sports, education, it's the elite. It's who can afford to pay the most, and then we are bypassing a majority of the population and denying them education, denying them knowledge, denying them opportunity based on an outdated, basically, formula that is now segregating people. And I don't agree with it. And I want to support change and working to how it looks to support the system and create a wise, knowledge-hungry society. And even going to the point of the college admissions scandal, like, it's just crazy to me. All these people in media cover one side story. Yes, did they do wrong, these parents and all these other people involved? Yes. But why aren't we asking the question, how did we get here? And why then are people taking such great lengths, doing criminal acts to get their kids an education? And so we need to shift on how we present this model, how we make it accessible to the next generation, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yes, well said. There's so many issues around how disproportionate access has become sort of the norm in terms of accessing good education, and that needs to be changed. So we're, in essence, trying to democratize higher ed and allow it to become what we view it as a fundamental human right, that students should be able to access the best education systems. And so we're scaling it by working with other organizations. And we also serve our own student population that hails from all over the world. And they live in 7 different rotation cities, global cities, from San Francisco to Hyderabad, India, to Buenos Aires, Argentina, to Berlin, Germany, over 4 years. And they graduate with not only an amazing academic sort of base, but in addition to that, they have a global network that they're able to harness to really kind of move next level in terms of what they can contribute. And most of them are returning to their countries of origin, and they're working with people in their own countries. And so, yes, I think this, our Minerva, and as well as other institutions, are really trying to disrupt that antiquated model that you talk about that's very inequitable, and make it appropriate for the 21st century.
For sure. And I think part of that being a disruptor is really just asking the question, why? Why are we doing it like this? And I don't want the response, because we've always done it this way. Because we need to shift from we've always done it that way into how can we make it, the best outlook for what we are in now and what's to come, versus, well, this is what we've always done and it takes too much work to change it. And change is one step. You don't have to change the whole model tomorrow. You make one step towards a positive change and what's working for us now and what needs to happen tomorrow, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's interesting because we have a totally different pedagogy. We have a different curriculum, and we have a different tech platform that delivers it. And in essence, we're disrupting the way that higher ed is delivered. And it's interesting in the midst of a pandemic where people are physically limited in where they can go and how they can travel and with whom they can work, to find that there's something interesting to uncover in that whole process, which is we can do so much virtually, and it is really scalable. And maybe I didn't need to have that business meeting in London and traveling from Salt Lake City. Maybe I could hop into a Zoom meeting and have a pretty decent experience with that. So we look at higher education similarly in terms of why can't we serve 60 million refugees in camps using virtual means to educate? Why can't we serve populations that are in historically underserved areas? This can be done, and it should be done, and we're showing that it can be done.
Oh, I love that. Asking the question why and asking also why can't we? Like, that's a great balance of it, and I love how you're saying this. It's awesome. I always say I'm an agent for change, and I have been an agitator for women empowerment, changing how we define beauty, how we define strength, and getting women to know their worth and own it and breathe fire in this world. And you're mentoring leaders of the future. What are some issues facing leaders today, and how can we change it?
Oh, excellent set of questions. You're identifying a huge impediment to what I see as human progress, but also we've made some massive progress in recent decades. And so I like to focus on the barriers, and I also like to focus on what positively has been done and how we can simply accelerate that, and in other ways just simply break it in order to get to the next level. So when I am mentoring young women, I always like to speak with them about what they identify as their ultimate, as we discussed earlier, purpose in life, and how they can parlay their skill sets and develop new skill sets in order to be the most effective, as you say, agent for change. And then to identify, if you take a deeper dive, what does that look like for these young women in terms of the types of populations they're going to be working with? Where do they want to live? What kind of, as my European friends say, you Americans have it all wrong. It's not a life-work balance. It's not a work-life balance. It's a life-work balance.
Yes.
So what is that life-work balance that you seek? And fortunately, young women are in a different place than my generation was. They have more opportunities to work virtually. They have more opportunities. Now, we still need to make massive progress in terms of that glass ceiling, specifically on the C-suite level, with business and other high-level leadership positions. It's quite dismal in terms of the outcomes thus far. But we are seeing fundamental changes, specifically with startup CEO founders, for example, many young women there, and accessing resources in a way that were simply not available to me in my day when I began my professional career. And so what can they do to be most strategic about leveraging the right resources so that they can do that? How do they find their own mentors, men and women, who can get in their corner and advocate for them and help facilitate opportunities for them? How can they be part of an ecosystem that is resource rich? So, for example, if you're a female startup founder in your 20s and you need funding in order to develop a product or a service and scale your product or service and get it out into new markets, you're going to need to access capital. And how do you do that? And which are the actors in that ecosystem that are going to help you get to those right sources of capital and in a fair and equitable way? And so being really strategic about how you tap into that ecosystem. And then also acknowledging that there are huge barriers that are systematic that prevent you from reaching your potential. And if you were male in your 20s as a startup founder and you were trying to seek venture capital money, for example, it might look different and it might be an easier ride for you. But still, as a female change agent, you have the power to band up with other people who are like-minded and really trying to change the game and change what that ecosystem should and does look like. And so, sort of full circle back to your question, what are those issues? Well, there are numerous issues, but how can we change them? It's going to take the individual, and it's going to take her ability to be tenacious and to be aggressive and to leverage the right networks in the way that she knows best and that mentors around her can do as well.
Oh, that's fabulous. Totally agree. And, often when we talk about change or disrupting, it does ruffle the system. It ruffles feathers. It challenges our belief systems, how we've always done it. It challenges us to change. And so do you often find that it do you rub people the wrong way because you're trying to disrupt certain old school mentalities and systems and create change? Or is it met with enthusiasm and agreement? Like, how do you feel? Sometimes I feel like I get pushback, but, I'm okay with that because I am the agitator. How has your response been?
Yeah, excellent question. So I think once you assign yourself as an agitator, I have to be comfortable with just not always pleasing everyone all the time. Yeah. That's okay. Right?
Exactly.
But I think further, there are so many amazing skill sets that we have the ability to develop, which enable us to really sort of reach across political lines or sectors or neighborhoods and so many different sort of areas where you typically see divides and bridge those gaps. And I think it starts with one of those skill sets is empathetic listening, where we can sometimes draw a line and say that's not okay. And other times we can try to seek out the commonalities that may be across, these divisions and try to find common ground in a way that someone who may be the most unlikely to agree with, a particular campaign you're involved with or something, is suddenly in agreement with you because you were able to help him or her see that you have sort of a common interest in the outcome of what this campaign would look like. And so I think that, especially in today's very divided society, is a rare skill set, but it's more important than ever to develop. And creating those allies, again, in the most unlikely of sources, is something that we all need more of. And so I think for myself, it's always taking a look at what it means to actually draw a line in the sand in some respects, but with others, realize that we each are entitled to our own perspectives. And if I can find some commonality and build interest in something that we share, that it will be much more powerful in the end.
Totally. And something to encourage women and men, I stepped into this role kind of accidentally. I was trying to heal from a low self-esteem. I didn't know my purpose. Writing my book turned into my purpose, a healing outlet for others. And then it harnessed my power to be an agent for change, to help women know their worth in the world. And so it's funny because I was a people pleaser and I had low confidence. And then I decided to step into an agitating kind of career. And I have to be okay now that you're not always going to be liked. And that's hard for someone that wants to be liked. And it's been a very good character building to help me really hold the line on what I believe in. And like, how bad do you want to know your worth when someone questions it, right? Like, you have to be resilient in that. And it's okay if you agitate the system or somebody's perspective and they don't like it. It's okay. You don't have to feel not enough or not good enough or that someone challenged you. It's that you're there to disrupt the system. And it's okay if not everyone can appreciate it that very moment, right?
Absolutely, right? So there's what I talked about before, just in terms of being a peace builder as much as possible. But there's certain times where it's just not the appropriate time for that, right? And maybe it's that discomfort that comes with disruption that is exactly what the world needs or the situation demands. And I think you nailed it in terms of just identifying that a big part of that comes from an inner confidence that, and sort of an ethical soundness where I'm feeling really good about what I'm doing because I feel it's the right thing to do. And therefore I'm okay being an agitator because this cause is more important to me than another individual's personal opinion about the cause.
Exactly. And it's not about always ticking people off and creating chaos. It's about finding that kind of balance within of where your core values are. Where is it that you hold the line on, and other things you experience empathy and understanding with other people, and you don't need to create chaos in that moment. That takes maturity and wisdom too.
Absolutely. Right. Having discretion, especially in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, just because you are an agitator doesn't mean you have to agitate 24/7. Like,
exactly. Only teenagers do that.
Yeah.
Mine.
Awesome. Yeah, so your LinkedIn profile mentions about migrant financial inclusion. Can you break that down of what it means and how you look to implement that? Because I'm curious to know what the meaning is behind that.
Right. So my PhD dissertation was focused on refugee youth education outcomes. And a big part of that was to really evaluate how particular refugee populations have fared. And an inextricable aspect of ultimately their education outcomes were linked to their socioeconomic status. And so there's a real focus in my professional life on providing migrants, but specifically refugee populations, inclusion to better education systems, inclusion to financial institutions so that they can, for example, get small loans and start their own businesses. Whatever it may be, I see it as one of the primary barriers to inclusion and in really developing a society that provides opportunity for all of us. And so there are many different ways that we're sort of tackling that. There are a lot of businesses out there, specifically in the startup community, that are using exponential technologies to serve refugee populations, online banking systems, creating ledgers for financial transactions, and to enable essentially a financial history for folks so that over time, although they may lack specific assets that a traditional bank would be looking for, they have sort of a transaction trail which can signal to lending institutions that they should be able to get a loan. And that's just one illustration. There are many others, but ultimately it is an attempt to, again, equalize the playing field and help refugee populations to have access to resources.
Wonderful. That's awesome. I'm loving this conversation. It's bringing up so many really interesting insights and just a great dialogue about, disrupting the status quo. And just because we've always done it doesn't mean that's how we should do it in the future. So this is a great topic for us. And I just wanted to end with, what are your next steps in the future that you're working on? If people want to connect with you and learn more about you and your work, this is just so amazing. Where can people go?
Yeah, Blaise, I appreciate this time with you. It's been really fantastic to sort of review what's important to me and hear your perspective as well. What are my next steps in the future? I'm going to continue to focus on the next generation and helping to train the next cadre of global leaders so that they can more effectively tackle the challenges and the messes that we've made. So I'll continue to work in my role as a professor and also with many different startups that are really using technological solutions. I also feel that I need to continue on a personal level to fine-tune what my purpose is and to ensure that I'm always recalibrating, as we chatted earlier. And feeling fulfillment out of those things, and also pushing myself in a way that may be uncomfortable at times, but that is really leading me to be the best leader that I can and the most effective and efficient leader as well, and to have joy along that journey. So where can you go if you want to reach out to me? You're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Nikkieberhardt. You can also shoot me an email at eberhardtnikki@gmail.com.
Perfect. And I'll provide those links when we post this podcast. And I think that's great to have those dreams and those visions and really leaning into, harnessing your purpose daily, because it really takes that effort to say, no, what am I going to do today? How do I get there? And I'm going to challenge myself to live life to the fullest and really own my purpose in life. And that's all part of my show, and my mission is really helping people harness that and become the hero of their lives. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective and all your knowledge and experience on this topic and really shaking things up with the world. So thank you so much, Nikki.
Thank you, Blaise.
That's it. We'll cover some of the recaps of what we talked about, disrupting the status quo to create impact, what sorts of changes need to be made in the education system to have more inclusion and have education open freely for all in this world, so we can learn more and just experience life and knowledge to the fullest. How asking why and why can't we is a big part of this process. Disruption leads to inclusion, and how we can create true leaders in this world. And it's all about creating that disruption in the system, shaking old things off and creating new, more powerful ways to live our life and step into our purpose. So that's it for this week's episode. If you want to learn more about my consulting programs, purchase my book, or have me speak at your next event, visit blaisehunter.com. I have a free offer for mental health. Go to my website, the free offers tab. You get a map, M-A-P-P, a video showing you how to get through anxiety and overwhelm in your day, and it's leading you through to get you to peace and balance. And that's all what life is about, is finding joy and peace in your life, even amongst your struggles. And so we're going to challenge yourself to be vulnerable today, lean into those difficulties and have those open conversations so we can rise up as the heroes of our lives and let us breathe fire together. If you've enjoyed this show, please subscribe and support Blaise the Trail podcast. Reviews are always welcome and very much appreciated. Thanks for listening. I'm Blaise Hunter.
You've been listening to Blaise the Trail with Blaise Hunter. To learn more about how you can breathe fire and unleash the hero within, or to listen to past episodes, visit blaisehunter.com.